Is it a good time to sell a house in Florida? Well, that's really a loaded question, and the answer might not be as simple as, yes or no. It's really much more complicated than that. I'm Chuck Shaver, and I'm a local realtor here on the north side of Orlando, Florida. And although my team and I work with buyers and sellers, I work almost exclusively with sellers these days, and that's been the case for a number of years now. Today, I'll be taking just a few minutes to help you determine if it's a good time to sell your house here in Florida. Now, I'll start with some insight on one data point that might surprise you. I'll tell you a brief story about a huge mistake that Tommy made, and then I'll be moving on to what I tell my customers here in Florida when they're looking to sell their houses. At the very end, I'm going to include a couple links that might be helpful to you if you're thinking about selling your house here in Florida. Data suggests that the best time to sell a house in Florida is really mid-April. But I don't know if I've heard any of my peers in the industry indicate that they actually believe that to be the case. Perhaps the data shows otherwise, but it's surely not significant. Not that there's anything wrong with mid-April. I mean, sure, it's springtime and the kids will be out of school soon. But here in Florida, we don't really have seasons like they do up north. We aren't contending with too much of that glooming weather, the ice, or the snow down here. So down here, buyers are out looking for homes to buy all 12 months of the year. In fact, I could likely make the case that any month of the year is the best month to sell a house, including December, when I hear so many avoid selling their homes because they don't believe that anybody is buying. But actually in December, there are many home buyers out there looking to buy a house in December so that they can obtain the Florida homestead exemption a full year sooner than by just waiting until a month or a few days later in January. I'm often asked about interest rates and other market data. Are interest rates rising or are they falling, and how will that impact the sale of their house? When considering the sale of the house, it's important to avoid looking at just one corner of a picture, that there are many factors to consider. Yes, interest rates do play a role with supply and demand, but that's not the entire picture. Consider inventory levels, which, as of this recording, remain very low. Low inventory levels can create high demand in spite of high interest rates. Plus, many buyers are aware that you can buy at high interest rates and then refinance when the interest rates fall. Back in the Stone Age of, I think it was 1981, interest rates were above 16%, but some buyers still made a killing during this time because demand was so low. So they bought low with high interest rates, then simply refinanced a few years later, and they really got the best of both worlds. Before I get to one common problem that sellers face when determining when to sell a house, if you're finding value here, show your support for this channel by hitting the like button. Then, if you'd like more information like this, hit the subscribe button and click that little notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I post other videos just like this. If you've got questions about selling, or if you're thinking of selling, simply give me a call. As of the recording of this video, many buyers are waiting to buy a house until interest rates fall. However, the Fed isn't really likely to lower interest rates until unemployment rises. So, some of those waiting to buy when the interest rates fall may face unemployment gaps that could actually hinder their ability to even obtain a mortgage for that house when and if that actually happens. Some sellers are waiting for lower interest rates to sell, but when and if the lower interest rates do come, these sellers may also face higher inventory levels with more competition, which could potentially actually lower those selling prices. Now, nobody really knows what will happen when and if the Fed lowers interest rates. We're all guessing. Sometimes trying to figure all this stuff out, it just makes my head spin. During the Great Recession, home prices plummeted, and I remember homes taking forever to sell. Interest rates started falling, but nobody seemed to care because the overall sentiment was of that doom and gloom. Many lost their jobs and retirement savings, and the prevailing sentiment was that only a fool would buy a home during this time. However, there were some that needed to buy homes, and they did so because of their need, not because of their emotion. Yes, homes did eventually sell, but it did take longer to do so. Those that had to sell sold, but they often sold for less than they could have just a few months or even a year beforehand. Sellers were offering all sorts of concessions, and owner financing was much more common than it is today. However, those that did buy homes during this down period now look like geniuses. These people often bought homes because of opportunity, because they were ready when the market provided the opportunity. They won, and they often won big, sort of like the stock market. But let's take a look at those that sold, many who purchased homes in the run-up of 2005 and 2006, many of whom lost, and lost big because they had to sell. Like the stock market, there will always be winners and losers in the real estate market. However, one stock market fundamental is that slow and steady wins the race. But it's important to note, this is not the stock market, and your home is not an ATM. From a historical perspective, the value of a home has historically increased by about 4% year over year. But again, your home should not be treated like an investment. It's a home. It's simply where you come home every day to sleep and eat, and it's a base to live your life from. So don't treat it like an investment. I remember a seller of mine that sold his home and his rental back in, I think it was 2019. Let's call him Tommy. He purchased these homes in something like 2012, so he bought them when the market was very low, and he was convinced that the market was going to crash soon. Now, Tommy's plan was to rent for a year or two and then buy again when the real estate market crashed. Against my advice to hold on to the rental as a long-term investment, Tommy was convinced otherwise, that the market was going to crash, and he sold both of them. If you aren't aware how that worked out for Tommy, let me tell you, it didn't. The real estate market took off like a rocket in 2020, and he left thousands or tens of thousands of dollars on the table. Now, yes, Tommy still made money on the sale, and I don't call his move foolish based on that alone, but in my opinion, he tried to time the market, which any stock market expert will tell you it's hard to do. The best time for you to sell a house is when it's right for you. When you buy a house, you should have good reason to be in that house for no less than probably 3 to 5 years. This 3 to 5 year period gives you time for your home's equity to grow. Even if you overpay for a home, given those 3 to 5 years, you're usually going to overcome a down market and overcome the expense to live during these years. Spending 3 to 5 years in your home also helps you minimize the impact of short-term market fluctuations that do happen regularly to our real estate market here in Florida. Yes, trends can have an impact on your bottom line, but trying to time the market, like Tommy that I spoke of earlier, can be a dangerous proposition. The best time to sell is when it's right for you, as there's always going to be motivated buyers for 12 months each year. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.